Good afternoon. Let's get the lighting balanced. Let's make sure people are here. Am I not in the light? Do I need to change the lighting? The lighting looks off. Okay, let me bring the light closer. You know how lives go. Yes. All right, I got people. All right. Let's see. All right, so the chat is open. People are here. I already have likes. Yay me. I'm trying to find a comfortable position to sit. My sciatic has been acting the absolute fool. If you know somebody, tag them, let them jump in on this live. This one is going to be quite informative. Let me see if I can get the angle right. Yes. I have on. It is hot today in the Caribbean, people. Oh gosh, and I feel like I'm cooking. But no place I would rather be than here, back on the live. No. While I wait for people to join in, jump in, make sure you get your comments and all of that. How has everyone been doing? Oh gosh. It has been hot. If you are in the Caribbean, you know that this time of year it gets really steamy. I have water here on deck. I have some tissue. The fan is on, but that's not enough. I got to get some AC put in. But today is going to be definitely an exciting day. I think. It's a worthwhile topic if you're in compliance or you're just compliance curious, because we have those as well. But certainly, one of the things that I think is really useful for compliance professionals to consider is that, um, you know, there are so many moving parts that you want to make sure that you have covered. And it can be difficult. And part of the reason why I've done this channel, yeah, I can see you're seeing it's extra hot there. Oh, thank you. Yes, yes, yes. Crematoria. If you know, you know. I have made running jokes about the sun now upgrading to the ultra sun, and that some days feel like Riddick's Run on crematoria. It has been incredibly hot. I am wearing black, but I'm in my Black Girl Magic shirt because I'm going to make the magic happen today. Today. So we're going to get into it very shortly. And yeah, lots of fun stuff. There'll be a freebie. There'll be a special. There'll be a lot of content. And one of the good things about this particular topic is even if you're not in financial services compliance, the manual review process is something that can be transposed to a lot of different industries. Of course, you be guided by what is specific to your industry best practices, but the objective process can be transposed. So what are we going to cover today? Hacking your compliance manual reviews. The aim is to touch it as little as possible to have the biggest impact and be completely effective. So we're also going to look at how you can get some quick wins in this process, because in compliance, you always need a quick win, at least from my perspective. And then what are some of the areas that are often missed? So we'll cover today what you will need to get ready and pre-pave for your review of the compliance manual, conducting the actual review. I have some considerations. I have an approach. And yes, I've actually reviewed compliance manuals outside of my role as a regulator. I had a short window where I was considering consultancy, and I did a review of a couple of manuals for FinTech clients. So from that, sitting on that side, it was for a jurisdiction on the other side of the planet. So I had to look at their AML CFT laws and prudential requirements. So, I have some experience on that other side. I can tell you where to look for quick wins. And so if you're a compliance consultant and not necessarily a compliance officer, this also has utility for you. What compliance professionals often miss in reviews, and now this is informed from most of my time reviewing as a regulator, reviewing other, licensees' compliance manuals, or just case studies from some of the things that are in the public domain, and you get documents that might be filed in court or something. Yeah, I know it is really nerdy, but guess what? All of that helps you to make sure that you improve the process. We still have people coming in. Tiffany, hi. Please send some warmth your way. Oh my gosh. I wish I could. I'd send you a whole 20 degrees. I really wish I could. Oh gosh, it is so hot right now, but it's actually a bit windier today. We have some tropical waves, so the season is changing. But we could talk a little more about that. I'm always happy for people to be dropping their comments in the chat. I love the interaction. Now, before I begin, let me just alert you to a few things. I mentioned it earlier, but now this is the official mention. There is a free gift to the first 5 people who get in on it. So make sure you watch all the way through. And I can tell you now, it is one of the tools for compliance officers that's available on my website, ignassolutions.com. But it helps. I've designed it to help you keep on top of not just compliance manual reviews, but everything compliance officers typically have to do. And I developed it with a bit of help, but it was also informed by some of my experience working with international standard setters. I've attended a number of FATF plenaries and contributed to a number of FATF works, so reports. And so from that perspective, seeing that process as well, and some of the things that come from international standards that are drilled down to each and every single jurisdiction, I might be biased, but I think it can help you. So make sure you keep watching, because I will be dropping that link in the chat during the live. It is not in the description, so don't go looking for the description. But if you don't get in on the freebie, there will be another special, another offer, and it is going to be a very limited offer again. And it's also going to be dropped in the live. So other tidbits will come. So I'll touch on some of those later on, but let us get to the main event. So I see people coming in, and this is like almost like the most people I've had at the beginning of a live. Yeah, Tiffany, it is hot. I would happily give you that temperature difference. So thank you for joining me so much today, and a special thank you to all of my subscribers. I am always happy to be back on these lives. They energize me, and the aim is to be more consistent. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you will know that I posted that this will be at least 2 Saturdays every single month. So I am committed to doing that for the rest of the year. But there will also be pop-up lives on current events or other topics, or maybe even an AMA, Ask Me Anything, in relation to compliance, regulation, AML, and that stuff. I might be open to an AMA more broadly, but let's see how it goes. But if you're a newbie to the channel and you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It is completely free for you, and it helps me reach more people who might be interested in the content, like compliance and like today's topic, or AML, CFT, governance, regulation, FinTech compliance, regulatory clarity, and all of these other, risk assessments, all these other fun things. The live is about to get going. So if you know someone who will benefit, definitely share, and share again. And thank you so much for joining me. Now I have to get to my disclaimer. And I give it to in every video that is not one of my YouTube shorts. So let me just get a disclaimer out of the way. I am a financial services regulator. I am not a lawyer, and I'm not a professional advisor. And the views on this channel are definitely all my own and do not represent the views of any international standard setting body or regulatory authority. Now, with that out of the way, let's dive in. So the first part of the compliance manual review, we are going to be looking at the prerequisites. What do you need to do in advance of doing your review of the compliance manual? Now, it is important for you to do what I call pre-paving when you're about to start any involved task, even when it's not that involved or that complex. Get something mundane. Let's think about like washing clothes. You sort them. You make sure you have the right detergents and cleaning agents. You check to make sure that you're not throwing bleach on your colored stuff, right? Well, the same prep work is needed for a compliance manual review. And what does that entail? Well, one of the first ones that is necessary is a risk tolerance statement. Hey, Sinkit, Nevis, is a risk tolerance statement from the board. Now, this is not a one and done statement. A lot of firms have a not so good grasp on what risks they are willing to take on. And it definitely just can't be a sentence or two. The board has to break down where they fall in relation to each high level risk. So let me break this down. For example, a bank may have a risk tolerance statement, and it would set out the different risks that are faced by banks. So, for example, credit risk, how much risk you're willing to take in relation to lending, and loans, mortgages. Are they willing to take on more risks in approving mortgages and car loans? Are there particular loans that they want to have a higher exposure of risk? Maybe they've done analysis in that market and see that persons are not, it's not typical in that jurisdiction to default on mortgages and on loans. That is rare. There's a particular set of research that is done holistically, and they're comfortable with this jurisdiction taking on more credit risk. However, the same bank might not be comfortable taking on too much interest rate risk. It's been in the news recently with Silicon Valley Bank and some of the other banks in the US and a few, I think, in the UK, EU, that have had follow from recent events. They're not crypto related. People keep telling you they're crypto related. It's not crypto related. That might have tip them over the edge, but it's interest rate risk or liquidity risk, operational risk, compliance risk. So you need to have statements in relation to the risk appetite in relation to each one of those. So in this example, the bank will be willing to give mortgages more freely to more persons who might be a little more highly leveraged or have certain exposures, because in that particular market, people will probably go without food for a couple of days to make sure that they pay their mortgages. And from anecdotal experience, the BVI is one of those jurisdictions where typically people don't default on loans. So having a high, and this is again my opinion, banks could have a little more of a higher risk appetite in relation to credit risk as compared to other risks. Another example is that of trust and corporate services providers and their clients. Now, that is the area where I have a big chunk of my experience in supervising that sector. And you have a lot of discussions going on around beneficial ownership and transparency, the risks with corporate structures. And I see the other people jumping in on the chat. That's awesome. Keep me on my toes. Right. So trust and corporate services providers and the structures, the trusts, the partnerships, the companies that they incorporate, they're in the news, and there's a lot of misunderstanding on that. That's one topic. If you want me to delve in on that, maybe in an AMA, drop it in the comments. But some types of TCSPs might be willing to take on more risks by providing, for example, their client risk. They're willing to have a higher client risk, and the board would have that statement. So they're willing to take on ultra high net worth individuals and PEPs and other persons who have different risk profiles. And that statement can be done maybe in a table or matrix. Tables are good. So you identify the risk and you have a high level risk statement to see that XYZ Limited has a very moderate to moderate high risk tolerance in relation to its client base, its markets. However, it's more conservative in its risk tolerance and risk appetite as it relates to liquidity and compliance risk. So you can have the ultra high net worth clients, the PEPs, even to some sanctioned subjects. Now, you don't breach sanctions. You have to know your specificity of certain types of sanctions where you would need pre-approval in the jurisdiction to execute transactions for sanctioned subjects. Some entities just de-risk and you're sanctioned, I'm out. But there's some persons who might be subject to sanctions, but it doesn't mean that you can't do business with them. When you have a higher risk client, for whatever the risk reason is, charge more money. I don't understand why people are just like, oh my God, there's risk, and they just run. That is an opportunity. So a firm might have a revised risk tolerance statement to take on that particular opportunity that other firms are not comfortable doing. So, they can, and to me, it needs to be something that is measurable. It relates back to the risk assessment framework. So you have a high risk tolerance for high valued clients and high risk clients, but your risk tolerance for compliance failures, operational issues, is medium low. So that can be a statement developed, and it would be, a couple of, it would be a couple of a paragraph actually. So it could be distilled in a table that is an easy takeaway, like in one document, one page, but it could be a fuller document. And the board, again, is responsible for that, not the compliance officer. Then there are some other things that you need to consider in relation to developing, preparing to review your restatement. Your recommendations as the compliance officer. And if you're not the money laundering reporting officer, they may have some recommendations too. So the reports that you've made to the board. If you're the MLRO, the filings you've made to your financial intelligence unit, so the suspicious activity reports, the suspicious transaction reports, your assessment of changing legislation, and other reviews, where you look at so many things on a regular basis, and those reports within themselves may or should have recommendations. Even if a report is an advisory report, you, within your contemporaneous notes, remember it's not just for James Comey, can distill what recommendations or what to look out for, so that when you go back to your notes, you don't have to review everything again. You want to touch things as little as possible. You want to have high impact the first time out the gate. So first, let's look at your work as a compliance officer and MLRO. You report to the board. And in those reports, past recommendations, pull them out. The board may also have agreed to take specific actions based on some of those recommendations. Did they? And if they have, this should basically be distilled into now what you need to review and update your compliance manual. And it may seem like I'm stressing a lot about the board and not about the compliance officer as yet, because it is important for you to remember that compliance is the responsibility of the board. Sometimes compliance officers go off on a lark. Yes, it's been delegated to you, but do not forget that they're the ones responsible for it. And sometimes when you have a poor governance structure, boards are happy for you to run off and onto your own little lark, because sometimes you might be unprotected in a toxic environment. It happens. And I'm not speaking about your career choices or anything. I think compliance is a really good field, but this happens in any organization. It's not just compliance. But because it is a responsibility of the board that is delegated to you, you need to make sure that you have clarity in what has been distilled from the board for you to do. So, and it's also good governance, because if a board is doing what it's supposed to be doing, then that'll be part of their engagement with you. So it's very important to not lose sight of that, because let me tell you, a lot of things can go wrong if you do. Now, of course, there are other documents that you need to pull into the prep phase of the compliance manual review process. I mentioned suspicious activity reports and suspicious transaction reports. Now, in past lives and everything, the Russians, we'll get to them. The Russians aren't bad. The Russians altogether are not bad. We'll get to them. But in past suspicious activity reports and suspicious transaction reports, or the decision to make those reports, you might detect something that's an emerging trend, right? So in every industry, we'll have certain issues that pop up. And when those issues pop up, it's like, okay, I need to file this. But then you start noticing a new pattern, right? Especially in this age of cybersecurity concerns. You might have a lot of phishing scams and some different things, but you might even have people coming to you as potential clients, because even if they didn't execute the transaction, it's a suspicious activity. You're supposed to still report it. But you might have a unusual transaction report from, say, existing clients. They're doing something that they haven't done before. And it may be because the world is a little crazy right now. Or somebody said the world is fine, but the people in it are a little crazier. They may be restructuring. There's a lot going on in relation to socioeconomic circumstances, crises in certain countries, strikes in other countries, dollar devaluation, BRICS kicking up. And I mean, that's an interesting space to watch. There's a lot going on. So existing clients might be doing things that they hadn't done before to take advantage of opportunities that are now presenting themselves. It may be unusual, but not suspicious. But it's important to log that unusual activity, to update your transaction monitoring and detect whether something now is becoming suspicious. And again, you have to know your clients. It's not just like an oxymoron that people put out there. It's a real thing. So When you see something that's unusual, engage, but document it, because then you would have a compendium to see whether you have a trend emerging that you would need to update your compliance manual. And sometimes we know these things anecdotally, but we don't write it down. So please, documentation is so critical. The Russians are not all bad. Gosh. So, changes in laws and regulations. How many of you have that dear to your heart? Oh gosh, I laugh about this, but it's not funny. It's one of the things that personally I am like, to have as a regulator, I think it is useful to have a holistic review, not review, and the law is changing every week. That is a painful process for everybody, regulators and regulated. And there are things that might be incongruent. So you might like regulate, like, oh, well, make sure to risk assess your cows or something like that. There might be an error that gets in there when you have these piecemeal reviews. Tiffany, I like your emojis. Yeah. So, when the laws change, you have to review it and you have to see, and that typically impacts your compliance manuals. And it might be a new requirement or change to an existing provision. Now, there are also national risk assessments and the reports that are resulting from that. Every country is basically done one or doing one. And these are things that are done in advance by competent authorities. And when I say competent authorities, your regulators, your financial intelligence units, your law departments or attorney general's chambers, and other law enforcement, so Met Police and investigators and what have you. They all contribute to these reports, these national risk assessments that lead to reports. And in each national risk assessment, they will dive into what risks are specific to that jurisdiction. And if one of those has been published or updated in your jurisdiction, that is also something you need to factor in, because they may be updated after a mutual evaluation done by the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, or an FATF-style regional body, FSRB. There are so many acronyms in regulation, it is not even funny. But I'll try to make sure that I just don't give like a abbreviation or acronym and throw it at people, because it is really like crazy with how many abbreviations and acronyms there are. But those reports have usually have some really good tidbits in them. And I have been a part of developing one and kind of on the satellite side of another one in a different country. And let me tell you, doing one, it's not fun. It's not fun. It is not fun. It is intensive. It requires a lot, but the information that you can get out of that is really good. Next, inspection reports and or internal audit reports. So your firm may not be inspected every year. And let's hope not, because if you're inspected every year, chances are you're rated high risk by your regulator. But that's just my insight. That's typically, except in one case that I know of for sure. Before the whole SSL scandal in Jamaica, their Financial Services Commission had it in law that they were supposed to inspect every regulated institution every single year. I personally think that's madness. Because it throws out the whole risk-based approach, and there are other reasons why that could be far too much. I've done inspections. There is no firm that I want to see every year. There's none. I don't care how good you are. I don't want to see you every year. And if it is that a regulator has to go in every year to see a licensee, typically something is not going right. But say you've had an inspection report within the last year, or you've had an internal audit done. In some jurisdictions, I think Australia is one, they require internal audit reports to be done. And this is in law. So depending on the type of institution you are, you would do this and reports would be produced. Now, from this aspect, I am thinking that you would be getting recommendations from it. And remember, your regulator for AML, especially for AML CFT purposes, may not be an FSC or a Treasury or SEC. It may be your financial intelligence unit, because remember, you have the other group of people, so NPOs, high value good dealers, casinos, all of these things are regulated and have different regulators in different jurisdictions. So make sure you understand who is your regulator. But you have those people producing reports. And the process is never seen as fun, but look for the positives in that this is an objective assessment that can help you to improve compliance. Get the recommendations. What is actionable? What do you need to do? And make sure the steps that are provided to you are clear. If something is not clear, ask. Don't waste time trying to decipher an element of a report that is not clear. As a former auditor, this is still one of the core elements that must be adhered to in drafting audit reports. It is also something that regulators adopt. And so if you have something that you are trying to figure out, like, don't read the tea leaves. Don't read the tea leaves. Ask a question. And I know that sometimes you might not want to directly engage with the regulator because it's like, the less they see of me, the better. But if something is honestly not, it helps. It helps you to not waste time. And part of hacking your compliance review process is to not waste time. Okay. So what else do you need to have on deck? You need the existing manuals and policies. Now, you might think this is your first step. So the position here in terms of what you need to have out the gate, this is not necessarily intentional, but you need to have it in hand. And for me personally, I like to have a sense of what areas I need to look at before I go back to pulling the document. So this is why I have it lower down. But from the points I've made before, I personally prepare a list of the aspects that I need to hone in on to help my review to be a little more efficient. And for business requirements, this is like, client onboarding, transaction monitoring, all those sexy things. The aspect there is a practical approach to making sure that you review what you have. So review the actual process. Client onboarding is a favorite of mine. And I actually did a short about it, I think earlier this week, where I was looking at the client review process, right? And you have A, B, C, and D needs to be done. But when you go and you sit or you shadow somebody, you realize that they typically skip step C. Why is that? Is it that C is superfluous and unnecessary unless you've just added a layer of bureaucracy into your manual? Well, prior, somebody else did it. It wasn't you because you're efficient. But this step is bureaucratic and not necessary. Or do you have a staff that's going rogue? Or were the steps mapped out in an analog process when things were more paper-based, and now the process is largely digital and step C isn't required? So that's definitely something for you to think about. So there you have it. 5 aspects to lock down on your prep work for compliance manual review. And it seems as though 5 might be a bit of a theme for me today. So remember to keep watching because I'm going to drop that off in the chat for the free tool for the first 5 people. And it's a tool that goes for $59.99 typically. The first 5 will get it free. If you are not in the first 5 and you're not a fast draw, there will be something else that can help you. So there will be another special offer. So just keep watching. Okay. So conducting the actual review. Baiting everyone. No, seriously. Conducting the actual review. I like to do things in phases and breaking it up so you're not overwhelmed. In the description, I've already added it in the description, are key aspects of a compliance manual. So the definition, the business overview, the applicable laws, purpose of the manual, risk statement, consequence, and I'm going through them fast because, like I said, it's in the description. You can lift it and just pull it out. But all of these are areas, so the chapters or sections of your manual that should be there based on what I've seen in manuals from around the world, right? What you need to do is also determine whether a change that is occurring or a change that you're going to make to the manual triggers a need for training staff. And if so, do all staff need to be trained? That is important. And the plan is the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be a little more timely in terms of giving notification for the next live, but I'm aiming for it to be in 2 weeks. That is going to be on how to develop your in-house training. So I am going to probably get another free tool for you. It might not be limited to 5. I want people to have access to developing their trainings. Trainings are something I've done for a number of years and developed and delivered, and even, I've drafted master classes and what have you. but it can be daunting if it's something you've not done. So when you change your manual, you might actually need to change staff. Again, going back to client onboarding, if something is changed, you need to retrain staff, plain and simple. If there's an element of, say, your risk statement that has changed, you need to retrain staff, especially the client facing, the relationship officers. If there are sanctions, now sanctions is topical, and that I could do like several lives separately on that. But there have been so many sanctions being issued that it is almost impossible for a lot of compliance professionals to keep up to date with which sanctions require what and what needs to be done. And when they have a sanction subject identified, what to do. Sanctions compliance is becoming its own specialty. And it's one of the areas that I'm actually a bit concerned about, that evolution, because there's so many facets to sanctions that when you have specialization occurring, you can actually have bigger gaps in the organization because other persons are not as familiar as to what is required. And so again, training required, make sure you check and make sure you identify who needs to be trained. Because with sanctions, even to like training the receptionist, a lot of firms miss the receptionist. That's the first person that a lot of firms, post-pandemic, you have people coming in or calling or emails and admin assistants to certain managers and everything. They need training too. They need to be aware of what's going on in the world. They need to be aware of compliance measures. So in the actual review, all the prep work would inform me as to what chapters of the manual I need to review. So for example, changes to or new legislation, I'll definitely need to revisit definitions, applicable laws, procedures. When I'm looking at something else, there might be a few other areas that I will have to look at. Now, any questions? Yes. Any questions? We're watching. We have 11 people on. All right. This might be a good time to drop the first offer in. What do you think? So yeah, I developed this fillable tool. So it's completely editable. You can edit it for compliance professionals. And it's focused on your functions as a compliance professional. I've named it First Five because it's only available to 5 people. And there will be no need to use a code. You would just click the link. Are you all ready? I need some feedback, people. Are you all ready for the code? Like, are your fingers ready to see who can be the fastest 5? All right. Yes, we have a yes. All right. So yes, Tiffany is ready. Everybody's ready. So I'm gonna paste this in, and I'm about to hit enter. And 3, 2, 1. There is the link. First 5 get in, and they get it absolutely free. And it's limited. It is limited to 5. It's not, I'm saying 5 and it'll be 6. 5. All right. So there. That is not the only offer. So make sure you stick around. But I'm going to get back to the compliance manual review. So consider creating a matrix. In the pre-paving, all of that will inform the different areas. Now, I gave an example of what changes to law may impact your review. And you know what's so funny? Like sometimes even in pre-paving, you get the hiccups because I have this lovely, hopefully I don't hit the light. I have this lovely whiteboard and the marker is dead. And I typically have like 14 different markers, different colors. I like using different colors of everything. And it's like, crap. All of them are dry. So I need to get some new ones, right? But the matrix. So I drew it on a piece of paper. But again, mandatory and optional changes should also be identified in your matrix. Like what is mandatory? So the law change, you have to do it. But maybe there's an international standard or best practice that has been published and your jurisdiction has not adopted it, that could be optional. And you could have that in a matrix. So even if you don't incorporate it, but make sure you flesh it out, right? Because even if you don't incorporate it, you will know that this is something that could be coming down the pipeline because international standards are always adopted in like 99% of countries. So it makes you even better prepared for future reviews and other aspects of compliance. So what I was talking about in relation to, now I'm putting this up on the screen so you could see for a little while. This is so analog, it's not, it's painful, right? And I'm gonna get to a point where I'm sharing screens and all of that, but in time. So let me put it back up so you could see what's on this, right? I have the different sections here of the manual. So what chapters? And then I have the different areas here that would need to have revision. So a change in law, I definitely need to update the definitions. I definitely need to update procedures. It might have a provision for reporting requirements. And then here I have an inspection report and an internal audit. And from that, there's record keeping, there are procedures, and there's reporting requirements. And you'll see asterisks are common areas now from two different areas that impact areas that I need to review. So that's what I mean by developing a matrix. If I'm inspired, I'll probably develop something that's a little more logical for you. That doesn't look so like, why is someone drawing with crayons type thing. But I think that, anything that can help the process, I'm happy to share once I can. Now, if you're finding this helpful, please share. And if you haven't already, I see so many likes, though I'm so happy. Like the video so that we could get more people get clarity on compliance issues that impact them. Now, let's move on to the quick wins, right? And in terms of the actual review, I'll be posting some stuff some places where you can get at it for free from following this video so that, even after the fact, you can follow along, right? Or rewatch. Rewatching is good. But how do you get quick wins when a process is so involved? The easy one that comes to mind is to test your triggers. Or so what are your triggers for compliance? And one of the things, it's kind of hard sometimes to think like, Simone, triggers, like we're trying to not have triggers. We're trying to not have non-compliance. But one of the ways to test is an area an aspect that is used in other parts of businesses, mystery shopping. So you have people who, as compliance come in to try and break your system. So people who try and get your service without sending in KYC and, try to execute transactions that are outside their norm. And this requires some pre-planning, but it's so useful, especially if you have some suspicions as to where you might have weaker links, especially with staffing and where approvals and sign-offs are required. Like there may be a manager, I know I used to watch, dating myself, Law and Order still plays, but the older Law and Order, I remember there was an episode where they were saying that they needed a warrant and they were going to a particular judge because after 5 o'clock, that judge would sign anything because they don't want to be bothered. Like they're not looking at it, they're not inspecting it to see whether they have all the legal basis, that the judge was just going to sign anything. No, I am not casting aspersions on the legal profession, but in all areas of business, you tend to find persons who are a little more lax with certain things in terms of the sign-offs and the requirements. So having mystery shoppers to test the procedures is also a very practical way to get evidence, because if you say that these are the steps that we need senior managers to follow for sign off, you might get pushback from said senior managers to say, well, compliance, clearly you don't know what you're talking about because we do this. But then you would have empirical evidence to say, well, not really. You haven't done it here. And we see this gap here, or discuss it with the board. We see this gap here, and the gap is a risk towards compliance and the process, and we need to update these things, right? So that's one of the areas where you get quick wins. You're only seeing pictures from the link. All right. I'm going in the back end right now while we're live. It should be there. Let's see. First 5. I'm in the back end of the link right now. I'm getting in. Oh, you're seeing the picture. Four of 5 have been sold, and it could be that it might be that this isn't updated yet, but it's there. And so if you're only seeing the picture, it might be that the last one has already timed out. So that might be the issue. So checking live, right? So you're only seeing the picture, that probably means it's sold out. So the first 5, if you want quick on the draw, hang on, hang on. We'll get there, right? So, but it's there. It's a downloadable. So if you got on, don't refresh. If you got on and you're in, you'll still be able to download it. All right. So, what compliance professionals tend to miss in their reviews? Do I need to dive into quick wins more or not? A quick win, I could just give you off the cuff. So when you see these things to be reviewed, a quick win is maybe to have a section of the matrix that you've prepared that needs board approval. So instead of just updating the whole manual, a quick win is that draft a short memo to say, we have changes in laws and regulations, as well as the last inspection report telling us that we need to have review and update of our procedures and reporting requirements. And these are the quick updates that we plan to implement. And you have it like, short bullet points. It's a 1, maybe 2-page memo. Send it to the board for them to ratify. That's definitely a quick win because it shows that you're efficient. It shows that you can communicate the issues concisely. It shows that you're turning things around because the actual update of the manual could take time. It could take, you want to wordsmith it properly and everything else. So that could take some time. And if you want that quick win, it is one of the aspects that I personally think is helpful for you to get a quick win. All right. So let's go back to what compliance professionals often miss. I'm going to tell you right up front. I am going to post this on my business page, the LinkedIn page for Ignis Solutions, later this evening. It's a list of 10 or 11 points, but we've covered a lot of ground. And one of the critical things to help in the review process is to identify what compliance professionals typically miss. It might seem daunting. And one of the things that I want you to take away as well is that these are things that I've seen that are easy. Like sometimes I guess it's easy to miss because you're so focused, like you have that tunnel vision and you've been hacking away at this compliance manual review for days or maybe weeks. And it's like, how could I miss this? So one of the first ones that people tend to miss, you've updated the manual, but you've not updated the old laws or regulations. Some of those laws have been repealed, completely replaced, no longer applicable, but you've updated this and you have old statutes, or worse, you have both old and new statutes. So it's like you have conflicting laws. Now, only one law might be applicable, should be applicable, or you might have multiple laws applicable to one thing. So record keeping is one of those in the BVI. We have it like in the regulatory code and the AML/TF code and some other places that would speak to record keeping requirements. But when one piece is updated, it might be that you update, say, an updated section of the regulatory code, but then you drop off the AML code that's still relevant. That's one of the areas that is missed and one of the errors that tends to happen from compliance manual reviews. You miss key aspects of suspicious transaction report filing processes and that it is incomplete or not properly addressed. No, this is not typically an updating law, but a lot of FIUs will update their filing processes. FinCEN is one. I think OSTRAC is another. Interesting fact. I didn't know that in Germany. Oh, there's a bird outside. In Germany, law enforcement raided their FIU in 2020. Did you know that? Oh my gosh, I learned about that this week, a few days ago, and it was because they had like 46,000 SARS sitting down on. But that's a segue. But following the review of SARS, a lot of FIUs will update their filing process, and a lot of times your compliance manual is not updated to reflect that, or it's completely omitted. Like, don't do that. That's another area that, again, tunnel vision, and you miss that one. Another one is that the risk rating system doesn't match up to the risk tolerance statement. So remember, we spoke so much about the board of directors updating that risk tolerance statement and filtering it out and what it means in relation to different aspects of risk. So if it's a bank, you have your credit risk. If it's a trust and corporate service provider, you would have other risks. Different businesses will have different risks, and those risks will definitely be relevant to how you then risk rate, say, clients, your products, your services, or even like the national risk assessment report that I spoke of. So risk rating systems, fourth, risk rating systems and corresponding due diligence requirements do not provide sufficient distinction. So for the TCSP example, the trust and corporate services providers, that particular one is deciding, I'm going after higher end business, ultra high net worth clients. I want the billionaires and I want the peps because everybody is de-risking them. Everybody's like, don't know what to do. But then, the business might still have normal risk clients, so lower risk clients, but your due diligence process doesn't make a distinction between the two. That's also a deficiency. Because again, remember, it's supposed to be a risk-based approach. So you have enhanced customer due diligence, and whatever is required over here should not look like your regular customer due diligence. And a lot of firms get caught, they get stuck with too much documentation. And then when they do need to, yes, I did say too much documentation, because once you've done your identification, your verification, you've established transaction monitoring and a few other elements, there's a whole course on customer KYC and actually getting it right. And a few other, and there's another course on inspections and all of that. But people still miss these points. No, I think this is a big point because it's one of the areas that I have seen, but interestingly enough, shameless plug, maybe not a shameless plug, I think it's a good point to get in on the second offer. Tell me what you think. Because the second offer is a percentage off of every course and every other product, not the membership. The membership never goes on sale. And in fact, that'll be going up in price later this year. But if you weren't in on the 5, let me refresh this, because I went in to actually look to see, and people jumped in on that one hard. So I am so sorry if you didn't get in. People were moving fast on that. Yeah, boy. You still having a refresh problem or something? I'm seeing something interesting there. You still having a refresh problem? I think you got it, I see something there, but there's something like appending something. So it might be that you got it. But that wasn't the only offer. No, the freebie was for the first 5, but I have a lot of other things, and I'll be doing a lot of other things. But for what's on my website right now, I've updated a code that's available for. So if you're watching this live or you're watching this within 24 hours, and 24 hours of 2 p.m. 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Atlantic Standard Time, you'll get 15% off of everything else on the website, not the bundle, because there's a course bundle that's in the description below. There's a course bundle where you get more than 25% off. If you want to buy the 2 courses together, there's a link in the description below where you could get the 2 of them together. But if you want to buy things individually and not the course bundle, you can get the 2 courses for more than 25% off. I'm about to hit, so it's a coupon. So this is not a link. This is a coupon that you enter for everything else. I'm about to hit enter. I am hitting enter. Where is Tiffany? Hang on. Where's Tiffany? Is she still there? Let me call out some people. There you are. All right. I gotta check because she's looking for some warmth, so I'm giving some love and warmth there from the Virgin Islands. That's your code. That's your coupon code, 15%. And I don't mind if you share it with other compliance professionals. It's available 24 hours only. I'm not putting it in the description below. I am not putting it in anywhere else. If you want to share it, that's on you. That's on you. But let's get back to the content. So yes, what else? What else? What else? What else do compliance professionals miss? When it's permitted, dependent on your business, and especially for some insurance businesses, you don't include simplified due diligence provisions. And why am I picking on insurance? Life assurance policies, life annuities, and certain life policies, right? When Granny gets to 98 and Granny's passport expired in 2020 during the global issues, Granny was very comfortable with the fact that she may not be traveling again. Why are you harassing Granny for an updated passport? Because her identity hasn't changed. She's had that life insurance policy with you for 40 or 50 years. What you want it for, and it might sound counterintuitive coming from a regulator, but these are some of the areas where I think compliance professionals miss really good opportunities to help themselves do less work. Yes, I'm saying do less work. Granny is not a high risk aspect to you, even if she's a pet, because her grandson is premier or something, premier, prime minister, president, whatever it is in the country, or granddaughter. Yeah, you could have that happening, and it happens in a lot of countries. Having derogations from your compliance procedures or some element of flexibility or simplified due diligence provisions is one of the paths that I think that you really getting like cross ways of yourself, and have the dialogue. And I'm saying this as a regulator, have the dialogue with other regulators and others in your association, because to my mind, I can't see how it is you can have a client for the last 50 years who has more sunsets behind them than in front of them, and wanting to update your due diligence on them because their passport has expired. So it's one of the vexing areas, because again, in other jurisdictions, you have people who don't even have identification, and there are a lot of measures that are being taken on board for financial inclusion to make sure that they're not unbanked or underbanked, and that they have access to other financial services. But in certain regions, and especially here in the Caribbean, sometimes we want to show that we can get the bonus points and actually shoot ourselves in the foot. It really sounds counterintuitive, but Granny is not a high risk. So there's certain areas of it, and I sound passionate, right? This is why there's a hashtag passion for compliance. But this is why I speak about some of these issues. You are, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it'll shut off the downloadable and thing. But yeah, it's one of the areas where I really do get passionate about compliance and applied compliance, because applied compliance should make sense. It's not that the law says I must collect a passport or a driver's license for somebody who's 98. The law doesn't say that. The law says that you have compliance procedures that are appropriate and commensurate to the risks being presented by. Granny has had her life insurance policy, which somebody about to cash, because Granny ain't long for this wall. It sounds a little morbid, but these are some of the real life situations that we are not, it's like compliance can't exist in real life. So these are some of the things that we think about. You have, and there's so many other cases, but you have to build in some level of flexibility into your compliance framework to allow for real life to happen. The role, so one of the other areas that I've seen, so I spoke about STRs and SARs, but sometimes the role of the money laundering reporting officer is watered down, and it's because in a lot of institutions, they might want the compliance officer to take on that role as well. If the organization is more than 5 people, I don't think so. Because sometimes the role, the work that the MLRO, the money laundering reporting officer, has to do could be a bit more than the compliance officer, depending on what's going on in that firm. And this is another big one. So you muddy the waters because you're thinking, okay, the regulator review, but they won't really get into that side of it until they do. And then you realize that you have bigger problems. I kind of alluded to this one before. International sanctions and sanctions compliance not properly addressed. Again, it's becoming a specialized area, and you as the chief compliance officer might not have a handle on how many elements are being updated. Because the sanctions, I mean, it's almost like, when they talk about for flying, like, they have issue like feathers flying, a pillow fight and thing, and the feathers flying. It's like the sanctions flying, like, oh my gosh, Treasury, oh, OFAC, oh, UN. Oh, it's like the sanctions are flying. So, it's kind of difficult sometimes, but I don't want you to feel daunted by the fact that, you have sanctions compliance as an issue. I think, it just requires you to be a bit nimble. Nothing wrong in having somebody focus on that, but make sure there's cross fertilization, because now this is a career tip. A lot of people like to hoard information to make sure that they remain relevant in a form. I am not a proponent of that, because things are changing so fast. Some people will say, oh, chat GPT will get your job. So, it doesn't make sense. But one of the areas that makes compliance one of those areas that I see chat GPT, and I tested it and chat GPT fails. Compliance is one of those areas that you can't have hacked just like that. But because compliance is so all encompassing, it requires a bit of design thinking, which AI ain't getting do yet. Let's hope Elon Musk is able to like help slow some of the developments in AI. Because if you know about Terminator, we don't need a Skynet moment next week. We just don't. But sanctions compliance needs to be properly covered, and it might need to be its own bit of the manual that is developed